listening to you and all the tools that you shared. I love it. I used to use it as well. I'm not sure they were recast right-click tools, but I used something called right-click tools back in the day. I've been with Microsoft for 10 years, so I'm not sure whose right-click tools those were at the time. So I'm gonna I do have a little PowerPoint deck to show, but what I'm gonna do, my plan today is to kind of introduce myself, um, and then I'm gonna go over the actual presentation that I give when I'm talking to customers about using Intune, about using moving to Intune, whether they're coming from Configuration Manager up to Intune, or whether they're coming from a third-party MDM over to Intune. It's going to kind of show that presentation. It's very few slides. It's mostly demos. So if I'm talking about things that you are well familiar with, let me know, and I can switch course immediately. I do have a couple different monitors, so I can see the chat. If I'm looking this way, I'm looking at the chat. If I'm looking this way, I'm looking at my demo on my slides. All right, and if I'm looking down, I'm looking at my presentation so I can advance the slides. All right. So first, my name is Joe Lurie. I work on a team called you can see there, the SCIMCXEUEM, or CAT UEM team. It's a lot of initials. And the reason I actually start with that, and you can see underneath that's my Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter. The reason I put all that there is because Microsoft Intune falls within all of these categories. And SCIM we actually just renamed that at Microsoft. We call it Microsoft Security. But up until Monday, it was called SCIM, Security, Compliance, Identity, and Management. Microsoft Intune falls into all of those areas: security, compliance, identity, and management, because we follow zero trust. We follow management. We're an Azure service. So we kind of fall into all of those. CXE, my team is called CXE. It's the Customer Experience Engineering. What that means is I talk to customers. I talk to customers either one-on-one, one-to-many. I go to what we call the EBC, and I'll talk about our executive briefing center in just a little bit. So I talk to customers. I gather insights from the customers. I gather feedback. I ask you why only 19% of you are using Intune, although many of you are also using it in co-management, so I appreciate that. And then CAT, the Customer Acceleration Team, that's part of that customer experience engineering team where we're broken into many different CAT teams. My CAT team is pre-sales or intent. So if you're thinking about going to Intune, you're going to talk to someone on my team. If you've already bought Intune, you're already deploying it, but you have other questions, you'll talk to someone on a different CAT team. And then UEM is the industry category for Intune, the Unified Endpoint Management. So again, I am a product manager on the CAT Intune team. I've actually been with Microsoft for about 10 years. October 1st will be my 10-year anniversary. So personally, I live in Salem, Massachusetts. It's not Cleveland, but it's Salem. We have the witches going for us, not really much else. In the Red Sox, we can't even talk about the Red Sox right now, 17 games behind. I do have two grown-up daughters. They're 26 and 24 years old, and I have two teenage stepsons. My wife and I got married during the pandemic. I was living in Redmond. I was living in Seattle at the time. I got married in my backyard. In my 10 years at Microsoft, I'm on my fifth role. And what I love about Microsoft is that I can be on my fifth role in 10 years. I joined October 1st, 2012. It's actually October 2nd for some reason, but it's October 1st is my anniversary date. Before that, I worked at a pharmaceutical company for 18 months. Before that, I worked an insurance company for 18 months. Before that, a pharmaceutical company for 4 months, a bank for 19 months. I can keep going back. I worked at Fidelity for 13 months. Instead of like Microsoft, I can have 5 roles under the same Microsoft in 10 years. The 10 years before that, I had about 6 different jobs, all different. And it's just like all of you. You move on to greener pastures, you move on for more experience, you move on for, more money at the time as well. So my areas of focus today are Intune, Configuration Manager, moving to Intune. If you're moving from something like BigFix or Avanti to Config Manager, you're probably not going to talk to my team. But if you have that intent to move to the cloud as well, that's where we come in. So I work closely with a bunch of Intune engineering teams. So One thing that we don't really talk about at Microsoft is that Configuration Manager isn't a product group. The reports in Configuration Manager is a product group. Queries in Configuration Manager is a product group. Task sequences, operating system deployment, they're all their own different product groups. And the same with Intune. Settings catalog is one product team, and MDE is one product team, and autopilot is one product team. So I work very closely with all the different product groups. I also work closely with Windows engineering. The role I was in before this one is not unlike what Cody's doing at Recast. I was in commercial marketing. And I was in Windows commercial marketing, so I got a lot of experience with the back side of things with Windows 10 when it first came out. I was actually in a different role then, but uh, some of you may have seen my blogs on Tech Community. Every time a new Windows version came out, I was right there to write about it. And then I moved into the role I'm in today right before we announced Windows 11. So I moved into this role June 1st of last year, and we announced Windows 11 on June 24th. So right before that, I moved out of that commercial marketing role, but I was very involved in the Windows 11 planning and marketing up until that point. So that's who I work with. Again, my areas of focus here. Let's talk about the EBC, because I'm going to show you my EBC presentation for the most part. EBC is Executive Briefing Center, and we have ECs, Executive Centers, all over the world. We have one in Atlanta, we have one in Singapore, in Germany, we have one in San Francisco, and of course we have Redmond, and there's one I'm missing. There's 6 altogether, all over the world. And we talk to customers, whether that's a CXO, CIO, CTO, or could be IT pro, and we show them how to use our stuff. And people fly into Redmond from all over the world, and they talk to our Azure team, they talk to our Dynamics team, they talk to our Office team, whoever they want to talk to. We get product management from wherever you want to talk to meet with you face to face. And I'm one of those people that goes to Redmond. When I lived in Seattle, it was a little bit easier. Now they're mostly virtual for me because I'm back in the Boston area. But we can do those face to face. We can do those again at any one of those centers, and we can do that over Teams as well. The last 2 things that I'm responsible for personally are customer evidence stories. If you ever go to, and I'm just going to put a link in the window, if you ever go to, can't type and talk at the same time, so pardon me on this, aka.ms mempowered, P-O-W-E-R-E-D, mempowered, you can see how our customers are using Intune, you see how our customers are using Autopilot, how they're using BitLocker management, all those different things. We even have stories in there just they're using Surface devices, but that also includes Surface management in Intune, so Surface for that story, but it's still in the mempowered page. So if you ever go there, those customer evidence stories were probably sourced by me or by someone on my team. And I also go to a lot of conferences. I do AMAs on Tech Community Live, Ask Microsoft Anything at Ignite, and whatnot. All right, so I got into Microsoft in 2012. Before that, again, I was working at a insurance company, and I was doing Configuration Manager. I got into Configuration Manager, and I promise I'll stop talking about myself in a minute. I got into Configuration Manager way back in 2000. I was working at New Horizons Computer Learning Center in Boston. And at the time, I was teaching the Windows NT40 MCSE classes. I can't even think about NT40 anymore. But I was teaching the NT40 classes. And we had this really weird rule where if you could teach the 6 NT40 MCSE classes, then you got 1 salary. But if you can teach any other class, whether it's SQL or anything, then you get a $25,000 a year bump in salary. Well, we had this thing called SMS 2.0. It was a 2-day class. I'm like, I'm going to learn SMS 2.0. It's a 2-day class. I'm going to get a $25,000 raise. So I learned SMS 2.0. I taught the class, and we went on a raise freeze, and I never got that raise for learning SMS 2.0, but it brought me to where I am today. Because I went from SMS 2.0 to SMS 2003 to 2007 to Configuration Manager. I was part of a team at New Horizons that Microsoft used to fly around the country to talk about the OSD and all that stuff, MDT, BDD, Business Desktop Deployment, back in 2003 timeframe. Which is really where I really got into the whole configuration management part of it. Before that, I was mostly server management. All right. Done talking about myself. I'm going to start talking about Intune and kind of what we talk about with customers. So as we talk to customers about Intune, there's a couple different things we can tell them at the EBC. Some of our customers are asking for, how do I enable hybrid management? And I know in the chat earlier, there was a poll about, are you using Intune Configuration Manager in a hybrid mode? Microsoft does a pretty bad job with the word hybrid. We don't, that one, that was a recast thing. We don't call it hybrid. We call it co-management. But we do have hybrid work. That means I'm working at home some days, I'm working at the office some days. We have hybrid Azure AD join. That means you join to Active Directory and you're registered in Azure AD. We have hybrid exchange. We have hybrid this and hybrid that. We're talking today, we're going to talk about just the hybrid user experience. The user is working some days at home, they're working some days in the office. And really a lot of this happened with the pandemic, right? We really got into that hybrid world during the pandemic when people were going home, and all of a sudden, and probably happened to all of you as well, all of a sudden your VPNs are getting backed up. So now you have to worry about, oh, now we need a cloud management gateway, or I need to split tunnel my VPN, or I need to go to cloud management. But those customers that already had Intune, they didn't worry about their VPN, the cloud management gateway. They didn't worry about that. What they worried about was deploying what needed to be deployed, and the customer, the end user devices were getting it. But today's hybrid work accelerates things like employee onboarding, employee skilling, knowledge transfer. At Microsoft, that's where Microsoft Viva comes in. And I am not here to talk to you about Teams and Viva, but that employee experience, well-being, again, Microsoft Viva helps with all of those things. Remote collaboration, asynchronous productivity, Microsoft Office with the collaboration tools, with I can open up an Excel workbook that I'm co-authoring with someone, and I can see exactly what cell they're on, or what word, what slide they're on, what paragraph they're on in Word, that remote collaboration. And then the last two things is really where Intune shines. And that's this remote deployment, whether that's remote deployment of a Windows device using Autopilot, or it's the remote deployment of an Apple device that's registered in ABM, or an Android device, or a Mac device. We don't have remote deployment of Mac yet, but it's coming. And security managed, non-managed, security on managed and non-managed devices. Bring your own devices got very big during the pandemic. And it got big because employees didn't want to, I'm going to use my native tongue, they didn't want to schlep home a big desktop in a CRT monitor. They had a home computer. They had Windows 10 Home at home, or they had something at home that they could use. So these non-managed devices, how can I work on a non-managed device? Today, of course, there's things like with Intune, we have conditional access, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's also things like Windows 365 today. We didn't have that 2 years ago. Windows 365 is about 1 year and 2 weeks old. Windows 365, I can log into my Chromebook. My stepkid has a Chromebook from school. I can go to office.microsoft.com. I can open up the grid, the waffle grid. I can click on my Windows 365, and I can run a Windows device in the cloud. So non-managed, non-BYOD devices, or of course, they can be on managed devices. I'm just going to do this slide very quickly because at the EBC, sometimes we talk to IT professionals who don't care about market trends, and sometimes we care about people that do care about market trends. So I'm just going to leave this here. I'm not really going to talk about it. But we do know that the cloud is everywhere, and we do know that even if your company today is not doing BYOD, it will be soon. It won't be exclusively BYOD, but it will include BYOD. And we know that because of those market trends. We know that customers and our customers are bringing a lot more BYOD, or allowing a lot more BYOD into the environment. They're letting their end users either choose their own device, or you know what, we're not going to give you a phone. We're going to give you $50 a month towards your phone, as long as you're willing to get Outlook and Teams alerts on your personal device. Bring your own device is that standard. And these are really the 4 areas that we talk about with a bring your own, or a choose your own, or just managing endpoints. There's that distributed workforce. And it's not just that it's a distributed workforce. It's that how do we manage that workforce? How do we manage those devices? And it's not just these devices, it's also a distributed type of device. There are HoloLens devices and wearables. There's things like laptops, iPhones, iPad, Mac. People can be logging in from almost any device. And how do you make sure that those devices are secure? How do you make sure that the data is secure in those devices? How do you make sure that they're receiving their software updates? We do that with Windows Update for Business. In Configuration Manager's world, you do that through WSUS or you do it through Configuration Manager. We need to make sure that those devices are secure, the users are accessing data in a secure way, regardless of how they're accessing. And again, I can get I'm not wearing my Apple Watch right now, but I can get my email on it. How do I make sure that that's secure? How do I make sure that um, any data that I access is protected by Azure Information Protection, or the hard drive itself is encrypted? So these are some of the things that we try to solve for our customers. And Intune can actually solve for all of these things, including that cybersecurity with a tie-in to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and employee satisfaction. Because if you use a Surface device, and I'm not here to sell you a Surface device, but if you use a Surface device, you can go from a cold off to on in 17 seconds, and it wakes from sleep in 3 seconds. That's fast. And of course, some of you are going to raise your hand and say, nope, nope, mine doesn't do 17 seconds. It's because I'm going to blame the security agents that you have on there. But company-owned devices, employee satisfaction, just getting their work done faster and getting it done more efficiently. I'm going to stay here for a second and just talk about something I put in the chat earlier. My machine, which is a Surface, it's a Surface Book 3, it green screened. So two things about that. One, why is Joe, who works for Microsoft, telling us that his computer crashed? And two, what the heck is a green screen? So we all know the blue screen of death, right? So Microsoft has had this blue screen of death for decades. On a Windows Insider preview machine, that blue screen of death is a green screen of death. And that's just something, I'm not sure why the Windows servicing and deployment decided to do that, but they did. So Windows Insiders get a green screen. On the other side of that, or on the same side, I suppose, a couple steps forward is I am a Windows Insider. I am on what we call the fast ring, internal fast ring. So I actually get a new version of Windows 11 about every 3 or 4 days. Sometimes they play nice and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it plays well with my insider preview of Office and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it plays well with my insider preview of Teams and sometimes it doesn't. So I have insider previews, what we call dog food for Teams, and we call dog food for Office. Everything on my machine is insider preview. Sometimes it crashes. But one thing that you may have noticed is I actually came back up relatively quickly. My machine shut down, came back up as a green screen. It said, we're collecting information. It shut down, came up as a green screen. We're collecting information, shut down, did an automatic repair. And the whole thing, I think, took less than 4 minutes. And in the meantime, I was on this meeting on my phone. So I didn't even lose any collaboration, any productivity during that time, because I just switched my focus to my phone instead. This happened to me in an EBC earlier this week. I was in a 2-day EBC, Monday and Tuesday. Twice on Monday, I presented. Twice on Tuesday, I was backing up the presenter. And both of those times, my machine crashed during that presentation. And so I used my phone instead. I would highly recommend, if that does happen to you, use the rollback feature, because I didn't, but use the rollback feature. All right, so this is all part of that employee satisfaction, distributed workforce, endpoint diversity. It's all about that collaboration. It's all about staying productive and making sure my end users can stay productive. And by the way, I want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions, either come off the mute. Don't forget we are recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, don't come off of mute. But come off of mute and ask me the question. Type it in the chat window. I can see my chat window. But I would love for this to be interactive. All right, so as we talk to customers who are going to Intune or are looking at Intune, most of them are also looking at other products. They might be looking at AirWatch, they might be looking at Tanium, they're looking at Intune. Some of them are coming from Configuration Manager and moving to Intune or moving to some cloud MDM, and some of them are coming from BigFix. That's still actually bigger than I expected when I joined this team. I saw how many customers are using BigFix. So there's that old world in the new world. Old world, as I said, before the pandemic, people had that one bulky desktop. They had that CRT monitor. Maybe it was a flat screen monitor, but they had that monitor at their desk. And that's the only thing they did. They came into work at 9, they worked on their big, bulky desktop, and then they went home. Or if they maybe were at a front desk or at a bank or at an airline, they walked in behind the desk, they logged into their VDI solution, they did their work, they went home. But they had only that one machine to work with. Today, again, I'm working on a phone. I have my device. I actually have a device sitting over here also. But one thing that Intune does is compliance. We talk about security, compliance, identity management. And this machine has been turned off for so long that I'm certain that it's not compliant. And so I'd have to turn it on, get all the updates before I could actually join a Teams call or open PowerPoint on my OneDrive. So we have multiple devices. And again, those devices could be IoT devices in a machine warehouse. They could be HoloLens devices. They could be other VR devices and wearables. The new world is very rarely do we see a customer where every employee has a single device. And those devices that used to be all business owned are a mix. Again, at Microsoft, I got my Surface Pro, my Surface Book, I got from Microsoft. My phone, I bought myself. I have a mix of user owned and business owned. So most of our customers are the same thing. They're allowing their users to get their email if they want it on their personal devices, while also giving them a whatever kind of device that it is, whether it's a desktop or a laptop or a tablet or whatnot. Again, with Intune, and I'm going to say this is not Steve Ballmer's Microsoft anymore, where everyone had to use Windows, but everyone had to use a Windows phone, which I loved my Windows phone, by the way. I was very upset when I was forced to get an iPhone or something other than Windows. But this is not Steve Ballmer's Microsoft anymore. Today, we know that our customers are using Mac. We know that our customers are using iPad. We know that our customers are using things other than Windows. And so we're working with those, whether they're business-owned or personally owned devices. We allow Intune to work with the user logged into that device, doing things like application protection policies. So if I'm on my iPhone, I can't copy something out of Outlook and paste it into Twitter because Twitter is not a managed app, and we simply wouldn't allow that. So again, whether it's old world, the new world is where we're really focusing on. I'm going to call Steve Ballmer's Microsoft even part of the old world. I might add that row in there. All right, so corporate network and legacy apps. All apps in the old world were on premises. And I'm sure a lot of you still have on-premises apps. And that's okay, because what we can do with Intune in our tie-in to Azure Active Directory and Azure as a cloud service is you can log into your device from anywhere. Again, hybrid workforce, I can be working from home. If I need to get to my corporate app that's behind my firewall, but what do we do traditionally? We logged into the VPN, we went into that app. The problem with that is any kind of security checks happened at the VPN and not really much after that. What we can do today is and I think I have a slide for this coming up, but we have that VPN, instead of a VPN, I connect up to an Azure gateway. So I connect up into Azure. Conditional access is going to make sure that my user account is good. It's going to make sure my device is encrypted. It has all the latest updates. It's on a recent version of Windows 11 or Windows 10. I connect up to Azure. That proxy sends me back behind the firewall to access that application. And every time I go to make that connection to any of those apps, I go up to the proxy. It cuts me back down. I'm constantly being checked for my compliance, for my security on my device. So even if I'm not using a cloud managed or a SaaS app, a software as a service app, even if they are still on premises, I'm still protected, and that data is still protected. Here's I'm going to start doing some demos. So before, and I know a lot of you have to do this today, manual and reactive. Somebody calls the help desk, hey, the service seems to not be working, or my battery is draining, or whatever the issue is. It's taking me more than 17 seconds to go from a cold boot. Manual and reactive. They call the help desk and you react to that ticket. Automated and proactive is where we're going. And we're doing that with Endpoint Analytics. So if you haven't seen Endpoint Analytics yet, Endpoint Analytics is something that we launched maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, something like that. Endpoint Analytics is part of Microsoft Intune. So you can see here, I'm in my Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Excuse me one second. I need to sidetrack for a second. I don't have any swag to give, like recast, but I am drinking from a Microsoft Endpoint Manager mug, if that helps anyone. I can't give it to you because it's the only one I have and I'm using it, but I don't have swag for you, but I do have swag for me. Hold on. All right, so I have my Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center, and my Endpoint Analytics I'm going to find in the Reports node. And when you license for Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center, there's lots of licensing packages available, whether it's a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, or whether it's an EMS or Enterprise Management Security, EMS E3. Doesn't matter. As long as you're licensed for Intune, you're licensed for Endpoint Analytics. And what I can see with Endpoint Analytics is, and remember, right now we're talking about manual and reactive versus proactive. So I'm going to get there in a second. But Endpoint Analytics lets me see things like that startup performance based on different models or model types. So the device performance, I can see what startup processes are running on those devices. If you're using a third-party encryption tool or third-party security tool, or most of our customers seem to be using, not most, a lot of them, excuse me, are using a third-party security tool, a third-party VPN, a third-party encryption. They're also using a third-party lapse tool and a third-party something else tool. So there's lots of agents, and all those agents are taking up system resources. So, and a lot of those agents are scanning the same files every time you reboot your machine. So the startup processes, I can see what startup processes are running. I'm in a demo environment with very few devices, which I'll show you in a minute. So I may not even have any, yeah, I don't have any startup processes here. I can see how often that the devices are being restarted. Application reliability, if I have an app that crashes constantly, I can see which apps are crashing. I can see again on which devices it's happening on, what models, what OS versions it's happening on. I can see a kind of a score based on, if I'm financial services, based on other financial services, how are we doing? I can create that baseline, and I can then have a score based on that baseline. And you can see my app reliability score is actually 0, which is not something I would want. Work from anywhere. Work from anywhere reports, very poorly named report. Work from anywhere tells you these devices are able to upgrade to Windows 11. They have TPM 2.0. They have a processor that's 8th gen or above, or one of the few 7th gen processors that are allowed to be upgraded to Windows 11. So work from anywhere allows me to see which devices should I focus on during my Windows 11 upgrade project, or which ones won't be eligible to upgrade. So during the next refresh, I'm going to focus on buying those replacement devices first. So work from anywhere does that for us. And here's the proactive remediations. So again, and this, just to go back, what we were talking about is we're talking about manual and reactive. Someone calls the help desk, they have a ticket, automated and proactive. Automated and proactive in this case, what we're looking at is I want to make sure that these services are always running. And if they're not, start them. I want to make sure that this registry key is there. And if it's not, add it. Or if I want to make sure this registry key is not there, and if it is, remove it. So I can have a detect script and a let's fix it script that gets run. In this case, I'll just show you one that's already created. And this, I'm going to show you this one because Courtney mentioned something about GP update as well earlier. So I can do this where we have a proactive remediation. If, again, looking at my detection script, it's all in PowerShell. So you do need to write a little bit of PowerShell. There's community scripts out there as well, but this is in PowerShell. So define my variables, and I can say, okay, let's, here's my PowerShell script, and I can detect whatever I happen to be detecting here. And then if I detect whatever this is detecting, then run this remediation script, which happens to be a GP update force. So I can do anything here from detect, as long as it's in PowerShell, remediate. And I can run it with the user's logged in credentials or run it as a system. I can enforce a signature check. It's PowerShell. We actually have that as a setting as opposed to an individual line item. And I want to run it as 64-bit PowerShell or not, right? So if I come back here now, I can say I want to create that script package, enter a name, whatever the name is. Oh, somehow my keyboard won't type in here. I don't know if you can hear me banging on my keyboard. Oh, won't type in there either. Let's see, I'm gonna probably go. Let me do next. Nope. Okay, I guess I'm not doing that demo. Anyway, but the settings are basically just that. Do a browse for that detection script, a browse for the remediation script, and enter in those fields. But yeah, I can't type right now. Any questions about endpoint analytics and how we can use endpoint analytics to be more proactive and reduce those help desk calls? One of the other reports I actually meant to show is, I can still go back to it, although I can't type anywhere, is when we look at those endpoint analytics reports, I'm not in any insider preview with the endpoint analytics team, but we have 4 other reports that just got added to insider to private preview customers, and one of them is battery health. So I can see if a laptop is draining the battery and what processes are likely draining that battery. So battery health is something that's brand new, and there's 3 others that are in private preview today. And right around the Ignite timeframe, they're either going to hit public preview or generally available. So be on the lookout for those. Again, interactive. All right, corporate network and firewall. We talked about that a little bit before. If I want to access something that's on my corporate network, I have to open up a VPN. I have to go through the VPN in order to access it. Today, we're expanding that perimeter, those perimeters. So if I look at something like this is what my corporate network looks like today. I do have that firewall because we're still gonna have firewalls. That's a good question. I'm going to go back to Tim's question. That's a very good question. Is there a time frame when Endpoint Analytics will be available in GCC High? So some of you that may not know, GCC is our government cloud, and some government clouds are, I don't, they're less restrictive than others. So some governments can actually work in Azure in a commercial cloud, and some cannot. GCC High, there's certain things that are not available in GCC High. Windows Autopilot, Store for Business, which is going away anyway, Endpoint Analytics. We don't have a time frame right now where it'll be available in GCC High, but it's something that, same thing with Autopilot. It's something that we're constantly trying to work on and go through that whatever certification process is necessary. So I don't have a time frame for that, but it's something that the team knows is very, very much requested, and especially now where like desktop analytics is also on a path to deprecation. That's going to be going away soon. So endpoint analytics, 2 different tools, but one was on premise, one on premises, one's in the cloud. Some of the same information, but mostly endpoint analytics is where we're heading towards. Because of all the investments in endpoint analytics, we're trying to get to GCC High. It's just not going to be anytime soon. And Todd asked about the battery report. We'll give the same data output as power config. It's going to give a lot of that same data and then other data. Again, I'm not in the private preview, so I haven't seen it, but I asked the same question, and they said that power config gives some information, and the battery health report is going to give a lot more information. I haven't seen the battery health report yet, but I'm told that it is more than power config. All right, so going back to that firewall, again, I can open up my VPN and I can access the firewall. But again, I'm coming from a home office. I'm coming from a wearable. I'm coming from even from a Chromebook, but I'm logged in using Windows 365. Maybe I'm a partner and I'm helping other companies, the smaller businesses. I'm coming from a personal device. Our network perimeter no longer is the 4 walls of our company or the 4 walls of each of our subsidiaries. It's the world, right? We can access from anywhere. I heard you talking earlier about how MMS was supposed to be in San Diego, which is a shame that it's not. I'm actually going to San Diego on the 20th, and I'm going to work from there for the week because I can. My funny, side story. My daughter's going on vacation and she needs someone to watch her dog. So instead of putting the dog somewhere, I'm flying out to San Diego to watch the dog because why not? I can work from anywhere. Again, so I can use any of those apps from anywhere. And so when we take a look at that firewall, one thing that customers have asked us about with the firewall is they want to know, again, I'm just going to go back to here for a minute. They want to know, when I have group policy, I set all my firewall rules in group policy. But then when I came over to Intune, I don't see firewall rules in Intune. If I want to go back to, even if I look at my group policy analytics, group policy analytics is a tool that lets you take all those group policy objects hundreds, thousands for some of our companies that you've created over the last 20 years, going all the way back to Active Directory with Windows 2000, and see what settings are available in Intune in the settings catalog. I can look, I'm not going to see any, I don't think I have a firewall one here, but I'm not going to see any firewall settings available in settings catalog. Well, why not? How am I supposed to set those settings, those firewall policies? Today, I'm setting firewall policies in here in endpoint security. So it's not that it's not available. It's available in group policy, but not available in Intune. It's just available somewhere else in Intune. So we still want to make sure that the firewall policies are secure. We can create the same types of policies. Again, my keyboard's not working, so I can only go so far here. But you can see my platform. It's going to be Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac OS even. So I'll say Windows 10, Windows 11. And I want to create a Defender firewall rule. And create. I don't think I'll be able to, can't go any further. I can do that though. And I can start creating some of these. I don't think I'll be able to do. So I don't have a field name that I can add. So anyway, so I can create these firewall rules now. Instead of doing it through like just Intune, I'm doing it through the security node in Intune, through the endpoint security node in the firewall settings. Our employees, we've talked about that. Employees are working from everywhere. Employees aren't necessarily just employees. Employees could be vendors, they could be partners, they could be people. One of my customers is a very large hotel, and hotel super chain, if you will. And that hotel super chain has employees that might be working only for a few days. So looking at those employees and making sure that they can sign in and out of that HR SaaS app timesheet, so they're going to have maybe a guest account in Active Directory in Azure AD, or they're going to have an actual vendor account or partner account in Azure AD. There could be a bot in Teams. We have a lot of low-code apps that you can add into Teams, even help desk apps where you can have the users type into the help desk that they have a question and let a bot answer that. So our employees are no longer just physical employees sitting in a call center or sitting behind the front desk or sitting in an airline terminal. The employees could be from anywhere, and the employees could be using any device, any device. And again, they might be on site, and they're probably going to be remote and hybrid. So one thing that we have to consider if they are going to be hybrid, one thing that I already talked about is how do I make sure that those devices are secure? How do I make sure that those users are coming in on a compliant device? If it's a company-owned device, if it's a personal device, there's certain rules that I have to create. And I can create first a compliance policy. I create the compliance policy that says something like, again, I'm probably just going to show you a policy since I can't type. I want to make sure, again, Windows 10 antivirus in this case. If I go into the policy and I can say, I want to make sure that there's an antivirus. That's probably going to be here. Nope. But let's look at this. I can require a password to unlock it, and it can't be a simple password, right? So I can do any of these. I can do my device properties, minimum OS version, maximum OS version even, so make sure that they're not running Windows 10 version 1607 or even 1909. 1909, I think, is still supported, but won't be soon. So I need to make sure that they're running a version that is still supported. So I can look at, do all of these, device health, make sure that BitLocker is installed and secure boot's enabled. So I can create this compliance policy. I'll get to the custom compliance policy in a second. And then from there, instead of the compliance policy, I can then create a conditional access policy. From the conditional access policy, one of those policies is I want to block non-compliant devices. So create the compliance policy. That doesn't block anything yet, but what you're doing is you're then saying devices have to be compliant in order to get access to Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Outlook, whatever it is. They have to be compliant. The device itself has to be compliant. We also have in compliance conditional access policies is my user account. When I go to access a resource, it might say, you're coming in from Boston? 3 seconds ago, we got a request for access from Chicago. Your user account clearly is not secure right now, and it'll block access to both of those connections. So we can do conditional access policies against the user or against the device for a myriad of reasons. And one of those reasons was a custom compliance policy. Microsoft knows if Microsoft BitLocker is enabled. Microsoft knows if Secure Boot's enabled. Microsoft knows if Windows Defender's antivirus definitions are up to speed. But what Windows doesn't know natively within Intune, or what Intune doesn't know, is if you're using McAfee EPO and you're requiring a specific EPO version, that's not going to be in the default UI in Intune. So there's a custom compliance policy where you can say, I want to make sure in order for these devices to be compliant, they're using EPO version. I don't know how EPO works. I'll just say 15. They're using very specific. So for third party, the reason for that is for third party tools. I want to make sure that this third party tool is at a version that is the most secure version. So I have these conditional access policies and these compliance policies that work together. And the last thing to show in this is update rings. So I want to make sure that the users are getting updates. And I don't have, in Configuration Manager, we use WSUS. We approve the updates. We might push them out to all the different distribution points if we're not using a cloud management gateway. And if we are, we have to configure the cloud management gateway as a distribution point. In Intune, why distribute all the updates all over the world to where all your users are? I know you're in Cleveland, but your users might be all over the world. Instead, Microsoft is already pushing updates to the whole content delivery network. Let Microsoft do that part for you. And then you just set the rules. I want this device to get Patch Tuesday updates after 2 days after they're released. I want to create this one update ring. So I can create update rings for Windows 10 and later, and I can say I want to make sure that these devices get Patch Tuesday patches on day 0, while these devices get it on day 3, and maybe 10% on day 0, another whatever 30% on day 3, and then 60% on day 7. So we can create all these different rings to make sure that all these Windows devices are up to date. But it's not just for Windows devices, because we also have now under Mac OS even. You can go to, I'm not sure why devices didn't just pop up for me. I can go to Mac OS and I can create these kind of update policies as well, update policies for Mac OS. So again, I can make sure that these Mac devices are also getting updated as necessary. All right, any questions about anything we just talked about on this slide? Interactive. Perfect knowledge. You're all doing great. All right, we just saw this one. The last thing I just want to talk to you about is Zero Trust. So Zero Trust is not a product at Microsoft. Zero Trust is a methodology at Microsoft. When we think about Zero Trust, we're thinking about protecting data. That's it. We want to make sure data is protected. Why? Because data is your livelihood. Data, all your IP, your intellectual property, everything that users have physical access to could be compromised. Everything that's even stored anywhere could be compromised under the wrong circumstances. That's why we have compliance policies, conditional access policies, Windows information protection. There are 6 basic, what we call pillars to Zero Trust. It's the identity of the end user. It's the device that they're coming in from. Again, devices are not just laptops and desktops anymore. Devices are HoloLens. Devices are wearables. Devices are iPhones. Devices are Android devices, whether they're corporate owned or personally owned in all of those cases. The apps themselves have to be secure. Microsoft 365 apps. I mentioned before, in my phone, I can't copy out of Outlook and paste into Twitter because we're not supposed to be able to do that. And you don't want your end users doing it either. Maybe sometimes, but they shouldn't be. The infrastructure is secure. Again, we're not necessarily coming through a firewall anymore. We might be going up through a cloud management gateway or cloud security broker, CASB. Networking is all secure. And of course, the data itself is secure. When we take a look at that Zero Trust methodology, what we're looking at is a combination of tools. And there's no other real MDM product that falls into all 6 of these pillars. There's actually a 7th pillar that I didn't talk about, and that's privacy. And that's kind of hidden in the background. Privacy is a part of everything that we do, where we make sure that things like, if I hop over to the right side where we look at Microsoft Information Protection, I can make sure that if an end user is typing a document and it has a social security number or a credit card number or an Australian social security number or a France social security number, that it's automatically marked as confidential. And if the end user is like maybe they're creating just a training manual, so it's not confidential, then they can mark it as not confidential, but then there's a tracking log as to why it's not confidential. So we enable zero trust, the identity. I log into my device and I log in with Windows Hello for Business. And one thing that we also have enabled, and this came out in Windows 10, maybe 1703 timeframe, is, again, I can't talk and click at the same time. But here's my settings for Windows 11. And Windows 11 settings look a little bit different than Windows 10 settings. But in the same spot, I would find my accounts, my sign-in options, and what we call dynamic lock. So if I walk away from my computer and my phone is in my pocket, where it probably will be, then my device is going to automatically lock as soon as I'm out of Bluetooth range, which is, how far am I going to walk? I'm going to walk maybe 6 or 7 seconds. And all of a sudden, my device will lock, and then my face will unlock my device because of Windows Hello for Business. But if you sat at my device, it won't unlock it. Even if no one's sitting there, it won't unlock it. So we're looking at the identities, making sure that the identity is secure. We want to make sure that the device locks. We want to make sure maybe you're using passwordless. That's where we're going. We want you to always be passwordless. In passwordless, one thing that I didn't have to do and I didn't want to chance it, which is good because my keyboard's not working, is when I logged into this console, my authenticator app lit up. So even if you saw my password, my authenticator app's going to light up when you go to log in as me. And one thing that we're talking that Courtney was mentioning before we even started all these meetings is there's a Windows V, which is our clipboard history. When I logged into this, I did a clipboard history because I keep my username and password for my demo tenants. Again, I use Authenticator. If you all get it, doesn't matter to me. But my Windows V can show you, oh, my keyboard's not working. It's funny. Can show you all even my password to be listed in there. So I put that in my password history, and I keep it there just for my demo tenant because it doesn't matter to me. If someone that I'm demoing to sees my password, my authenticator app is going to pop open and say, someone's trying to access this console from wherever, from this location, and the map will pop up and say from Cleveland. So again, the devices, make sure that we showed you that, make sure Secure Boot's enabled, make sure TPM's enabled, make sure that antivirus is up to date, classifying the data, routing through that cloud app security broker, the route through the CASB gateway, and again, making sure Azure networking is all secure. And when you start thinking about things like Windows 365, Windows 365 is our non-persistent, it's our persistent cloud PC technology that we have, part of Intune. It's only in Intune. If you're going to use Cloud PC, then you're going to do it right from here, provisioning in Windows 3, provisioning in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. I don't have a license for it, so you see I can't really do much here without that license. But once I get that license, I can provision these cloud PCs for my end users. They need licenses as well. And that all works with Azure networking. However, your Azure team has configured their networking, Cloud PC is going to follow that same network, those same network rules. And of course, Azure Sentinel and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, all these things working together to enable that zero trust. So in the old days, again, we just saw this slide, the old world versus the new world, but it's not old versus new anymore because that technology has evolved. And as that technology evolved, we brought in all these tools to go with it. And again, zero trust isn't a tool, it's a methodology. But all of this works together to make sure that your users, data, devices, everything is secure. Your users are happy, your users are productive. Your users don't have to call the help desk when something breaks because automated remediation can look for those ahead of time. Will you have to set that up? Sure. You'll get some help desk calls and you'll see what the fixes are and you'll create that script and you'll push out the script through Endpoint Analytics, or you'll add the script to Endpoint Analytics. There's nothing even pushed out to the device, just the policy to run the script. So all of those things come together to make sure that your devices, your end users are all happy and they're all doing what they need to be doing on any given day. One thing I meant to ask in the beginning, does anybody know what is this blue? What is that? I actually have it on my desktop. So if you look at my desktop, this is the default Windows 11 desktop. What do we call this? Anyone know what we call that? This is the Windows 11 Bloom, B-L-O-O-M. I don't know why Bloom. It's the Windows 11 Bloom. It's the background Windows 11, the default wallpaper. And if you ever see the word Windows 11 Bloom, that's what Windows 11 Bloom is. Just a big blue flower in the middle. All right, I am done with myself. I'm done with my my EBC session, if you will. What questions can I answer for anyone? Or how can I help you move? I saw when Recast did that survey, I'm going to look at that survey now. How many people are using Configuration Manager? I see 24% using Configuration Manager, 18% using Intune, 34% using co-management, and 22% using Service. Now I'm not worried about those. I'm looking at the Configuration Manager. How can we help you move off of Configuration Manager and move up into a more modern management technology like Intune? I'm looking for anybody to come off of mute here. No? We shy? Should we shut off the recording? Then you can ask? Sometimes that's
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and do that.